The day my father changed the locks on our family home, he looked me straight in the eyes and smiled. "You stopped being my son the moment you embarrassed this family." I stood on the porch with one suitcase and nowhere to go. My younger brother Ethan watched from the upstairs window, grinning as if he'd just won a prize. 3 hours earlier, Dad had accused me of stealing nearly $300,000 from the family construction company. The police questioned me. Employees whispered behind my back. My fiancé ended our engagement before sunset. And the worst part? I knew exactly who had framed me. Ethan. But nobody believed me. Growing up, Ethan had always been the favorite. If he broke something, I got blamed. If he failed a class, Dad hired him a tutor. When I graduated with honors and helped build the family business from a tiny garage operation into a company worth millions, Dad called it doing my job. Meanwhile, Ethan spent his days buying expensive cars, gambling and posting luxury vacations online. Yet somehow he was still the future of the company. I was simply the employee who happened to share their last name. The fraud investigation dragged on for 6 months. Every bank account I owned was frozen. Friends disappeared. Even relatives refused to answer my calls. Only one person stayed beside me. My grandmother, Eleanor. She quietly rented me a tiny apartment and handed me an old envelope. "Your grandfather trusted you," she whispered. "Open this after I'm gone." I didn't understand what she meant. 3 weeks later, she passed away peacefully. At her funeral, my parents barely cried. They spent most of the service discussing vacation plans. That was the moment I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. And one tiny key. The letter revealed something nobody knew. Years before he died, Grandpa had secretly purchased 40% of the company shares. He never transferred them to my father. Instead, he placed them inside a private family trust. The trust had one condition. The shares would belong to whichever grandson proved they protected the family's integrity, not its reputation. The trustee had been watching us for years. Grandpa had predicted exactly what would happen. The key opened a safety deposit box. Inside were financial records, voice recordings, contracts, and evidence. Enough evidence to destroy Ethan. For months, Grandpa's private investigator had secretly documented Ethan stealing company money. Fake invoices. Shell companies. Forged signatures. Everything. Even the transaction used to frame me. Grandpa had suspected Ethan would eventually cross every line imaginable. He was right. I contacted the trustee. An elderly attorney named Victor Grant. He listened quietly before saying something unexpected. "We've been waiting for you." He explained the trust couldn't act until someone presented the evidence voluntarily. That someone was me. The legal process would take months. So I waited. Silently. Unlike Ethan, I wasn't interested in quick revenge. I wanted permanent consequences. During those months, Ethan became even more reckless. He convinced Dad to expand the business using massive bank loans. He purchased luxury offices, private helicopters, sports cars. Every newspaper praised him as a brilliant young businessman. I watched every interview, every headline, every celebration, because I knew exactly how the story would end. 9 months later, the annual shareholders meeting arrived. The conference room overflowed with investors. Dad stood proudly beside Ethan. They expected another year of applause. Instead, Victor Grant entered carrying 3 black binders. "I represent the Harrison Family Trust." Silence filled the room. Dad frowned. "What trust?" Victor calmly explained Grandpa's ownership. The board members exchanged confused looks. Dad's face slowly lost its color. Then came the evidence. One document after another. Bank transfers. Hidden accounts. Video footage. Voice recordings. Each piece connected Ethan to years of financial crimes. The room became deathly quiet. Ethan laughed nervously. "This is fake." Victor pressed a button. A recording played through the speakers. It was Ethan. "I'll blame Noah. Dad believes anything I tell him." Nobody moved. Dad stared at his own son in disbelief. The police entered less than 10 minutes later. Someone from the board had already called them. Ethan tried running. He made it all the way to the parking lot before officers arrested him. Television cameras captured everything. The same reporters who once praised him now broadcast his arrest nationwide. Dad looked 20 years older overnight. He came to my apartment 2 days later. For the first time in my life. He apologized. I failed you. I looked at the man who had destroyed my life without asking a single question. I know. He began crying. I believed the wrong son. I answered honestly. No. You believed the son you wanted to believe. He had no response. The court proceedings lasted almost a year. Ethan received a lengthy prison sentence for fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and tax crimes. The banks demanded immediate repayment of every fraudulent loan. The company nearly collapsed. But Grandpa's trust activated. As legal owner of 40% of the shares, I became acting chairman. The board voted unanimously to remove my father as CEO. Not because I demanded it. Because they no longer trusted his judgment. Dad packed his office into 2 cardboard boxes. As he walked past my new office, he stopped. I suppose this was your revenge. I shook my head. No. He looked confused. My revenge would have been letting the company die. Instead, I spent 2 years rebuilding everything. I rehired employees Ethan had fired. Paid vendors their overdue invoices. Returned stolen money wherever possible. Profits slowly recovered. The company earned back its reputation. Not because of revenge. Because someone finally chose responsibility over pride. One rainy afternoon, I visited Grandpa's grave. I placed the old key beside the headstone. You knew, I whispered. The wind rustled through the trees. For the first time in years, I felt peaceful. Not because I'd defeated my family, but as I had refused to become like them. 3 years later, my father asked if we could have dinner. We met at a quiet restaurant. He looked smaller than I remembered. Retirement had humbled him. Halfway through the meal, he slid an old photograph across the table. It showed me and Ethan as children building a treehouse with Grandpa. I keep wondering where everything went wrong, he admitted. I studied the picture for a long moment. It didn't happen all at once. It happened every time you excused his lies. Every time you ignored the truth because it was easier. Dad nodded slowly. I can't change the past. No, I replied. But you can stop defending it. That was the first honest conversation we'd ever had. We never became close again. Some damage simply cannot be repaired. A month later, I received one final letter from Victor Grant. Inside was a note Grandpa had written years before his death. Read, "A family isn't measured by the blood it shares. It's measured by the truth it's willing to protect. If you ever have to choose between keeping the peace and doing what's right, choose what's right. Peace built on lies never lasts." I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the company charter in my office. Every new employee asked about the framed note on the wall. I always gave the same answer. It's the reason this company still exists. Because the greatest revenge was never destroying the people who betrayed me. It was proving that honesty could build everything their lies had nearly destroyed.